Welcome! As today is a very special day in the Star Wars community, uh, well, kind of. I mean, I'm recording this on the 3rd, but I won't be releasing until May 4th. Alright, May the 4th be with you and all that stuff. Today, I thought I'd talk about something that, everyone always decides, like, are you more Sith? Are you more Jedi? Maybe you're bounty hunter? Maybe you're smuggler? Well, realistically, most people do not have enough Force to be either a Sith or a Jedi in the Star Wars universe. But this symbol is a mixture of the Jedi Order and the Sith symbol, the Sith Empire. So today I'm going to talk about the Sith. Part of this, collectively, all of them together, they're known as the Sith Order. Technically, they use the Force as a tool to gain power over the galaxy. They've been fighting the Jedi for thousands of years. Several thousand years before the Clone Wars, which would be episode 2, 3, and a little bit of episode 4 and 5. And also the television show, The Clone Wars, which I believe takes place between episodes 2 and 3. And I think the new season takes place a little bit after episode 3. The Sith were originally established by a rogue Jedi, the first Dark Jedi who became the first Sith. And this Jedi was able to create a following of individuals who adhered to a new philosophy of the dark side of the Force, as opposed to the peace and balance that the Jedi followed. This created the 100-Year Darkness. For the 100-Year Darkness, the Sith Order, which comprised entirely of a combination of Jedis who had defected from the original Jedi Order and new recruits of new Padawans and such that became inducted into the Sith ideals. And this created sort of a civil war where the two of them fought against each other. Eventually the Sith were defeated. In this defeat, they fled from the known galaxy. However, instead of being completely defeated when they fled, they ended up settling on Moraband. Moraband is an Outer Rim planet, and it's relatively desolate and mountainous. The Valley of the Dark Lords is on this planet. It's also where Darth Bane, his tomb is. I believe during the Clone Wars, Yoda goes to this place. Anyways, mostly Moraband is red sand, and there's not a whole lot of life on there. But they fled there and used that as their base of operations. And since it's outside of the where the Jedi are able to connect with via the Force, it was relatively safe for them since it was in the outer areas. As the Sith Order gained in power, they started creating temples and tombs in the Valley of the Dark Lords. The Sith used slaves, and quite often they would fight the Jedi, either in small skirmishes or in large-scale wars. The Sith were a lot more ingenious when it came to technology. They created weapons out of kyber crystals, which are force-attuned crystals that naturally grow and you can find, and they could be found scattered across the planets. They were most well known for being the kinds of crystals needed to create lightsabers. Most Jedi trainer Padawans get their crystal for their lightsaber in the crystal caves on Ilum, if they're not using artificial ones. However, the Sith will be able to grab these kyber crystals from all over, which is technically why some crystals have different attributes to them. Not just color, but blades can do different things depending on how the lightsaber is designed. They can come in different lengths. They can have different tunements. They can have different power strengths. Let's see. About 6,000 years before the Galactic Empire appeared, the Sith built a shrine in Coruscant, which, as this took place 6,000 years before the Galactic Empire appeared, this would have taken about 6,800 years before Episode 1 would have been released. Or the timeline of Episode 1. Later, the Jedi built a temple on top of that shrine in hopes of containing this dark side power that the Sith created. The Sith would build temples on other planets as well, including Malachor, which is known for the Great Scourge of Malachor, as well as a few other things. For a while, there's Zabraks on there, which, if you're not familiar with, Darth Maul is a Zabrak, Darth Mirian. It's the planet is affiliated with Sith. This is also where the Crossguard lightsaber appeared. The Crossguard lightsaber eventually was adapted into Kylo Ren's Crossguard lightsaber design, but his is a little bit different. You actually have to have a specific kind of kyber crystal for it to function properly. During the as time went on, the Sith, about 1,000 years before the Sith attacked and had infiltrated the Coruscant's core for Palpatine, for example, and his superior. They had kind of been doing infighting, just because they were incredibly aggressive and focused on power and proving their battle prowess. The strong survive and the strong rule, and the weak do not. So pretty much all of the Sith ended up killing each other. The Jedi managed to take down most of the remaining Sith. However, Darth Bane was able to escape. Darth Bane is a human. He's a human Sith. He was the propagator of all Sith after that point, which would have been 1,000 years before the Clone Wars. Everyone after him, or every Sith after him, specifically the ones in the movies, all came as a direct line from him. Darth Bane was the one who set up the rule of two, so only one Sith Lord and one Sith Apprentice. And when the Sith Apprentice can kill the Sith Lord, then the Sith Apprentice becomes the new Sith Lord. Which meant that whenever you picked up an apprentice, you knew that everything that you instilled into him would eventually be used against you. It also meant that each Sith became more and more powerful and more crafty than their predecessor. And Darth Bane eventually was killed. He died. As rather obvious as his apprentice continued on. And the rule of two continued on for quite a while, until Episode 1, where Darth Sidious appeared, or Emperor Palpatine, depending on how you want to call him. But his master, Darth Plagueis, was a particular... He followed the rule of two. And Darth Plagueis was... He was also a human, we think. And he trained Emperor Palpatine, or Darth Sidious, in the ways of Sith alchemy, which that's what Plagueis focused on. Darth Sidious eventually did kill his master, but Darth Plagueis is supposedly one of the most well-known in Sith alchemy. And I'll get into Sith alchemy in a different episode, but I thought that this part here might be relatively interesting to you. Darth Sidious actually took on multiple apprentices. Most noticeably, as you probably know, he had Darth Maul, and he had Darth Tyrannus, and he also had Darth Vader. Darth Maul was actually picked up as an apprentice before Darth Plagueis was killed, breaking the rule of two. However, Darth Sidious did not train Darth Maul to be a full Sith. He had him as a Sith assassin, and when Darth Sidious actually, when he took on Darth Maul as an apprentice, Darth Plagueis knew about this, and he was okay with it. Because they both agreed that Darth Maul would not be trained as a Sith completely. Some of this was due to the fact that he wasn't actually deemed a full Sith. He was a weapon for the Sith. So, just as opposed to being a full-on Sith, he was just an assassin, something that they used for him. After Darth Maul, of course, there was Darth Tyrannus, who was originally Count Dooku from the Sereno planet. He was originally a Jedi, and he thought that the government was corrupt, so he left. He left the Jedi Order, and he left the Galactic Republic. And when Darth Sidious got a hold of him, he picked him up and changed his name to Darth Tyrannus. He helped with creating the Clone Wars. His master was actually Yoda. Although eventually his master became Darth Sidious. He trained Qui-Gon Jinn, and General Grievous, and Ventress, and Savage Opress, and and Quinlan Vos. Some of them are a lot more well known than others. Quinlan Vos was not a particularly important character, but he actually had an apprentice as well. Savage and Oppress and Ventress, they have a bit more interesting stories. Savage Oppress is actually Darth Maul's brother. He originally had Darth Maul, his brother, as his Sith master as well as Darth Tyrannus. And his horns are a little bit different, but he became a Sith. Pretty much all the Dathomirian and the Zabraks are very dark side oriented. And Ventress is actually a Dathomirian as well, but she's not a Zabrak. But she actually ended up picking up an apprentice of Quinlan Vos as well. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself there. Let's go back to the main storyline. Darth Sidious ended up picking up Vader ultimately, and Vader technically has some apprentices, more than people might think. He's got some interesting affiliations. He's had 3 masters, both Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Qui-Gon Jinn only during episode 1, where he just brought him along and had a little bit of tutelage. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi, who appeared in episode 2 and 3 as his Jedi Master. And then Darth Sidious from about indirectly episode 2, kind of indirectly episode 3, but mostly later on. But he's had 2 apprentices. He's had Ahsoka Tano, who appears in the Clone Wars. She is a... she only appears in the Clone Wars. She's a Togrunta. And I've been told that later on in the Clone Wars cartoon, animated cartoon, she will actually be appearing and fighting Darth Vader. The only other one to mention is the Inquisitorius, which is an organization of Force-sensitive agents who work for the Empire, and they have a couple of different names, and they are also not technically Sith, but they do have lightsabers and they are Force sensitives, but they weren't picked up by Vader as apprentices. They're simply taught by him. Their leader is Darth Vader and the Grand Inquisitor. Grand Inquisitor, I'm pretty sure this appears mostly in the animated show, but yeah, they're not really considered full-on Sith. When Darth Sidious, aka Emperor Palpatine, was kind of attacked by his own Force lightning in episode 3, and his face kind of distorted, that is actually Sith alchemy reacting. He'd used Sith alchemy to change the way his face looked, and the Sith alchemy that his lightning interacted with the Sith alchemy that made up his face, and effectively what happened was it kind of melted it. And Sith alchemy, the mask, is kind of a little unusual in that it's really susceptible to other dark side alterations, and it's very difficult to fix it once it's been affected by other dark side. Um, Technically, the Sith were destroyed by the end of Episode 6. The last known Sith were killed. But as we know, the Sith are not completely gone. Many individuals and groups still adhere to the philosophy of the Sith. The advisor of Palpatine was still around. He existed beyond that, as well as the Acolytes of the Beyond, which they aren't effectively Sith, but they collected Sith artifacts, technically to destroy them. There's Supreme Leader Snoke, who he's actually not. The hologram makes him out to be about 20 some, 20, 30 feet tall. He's actually about 7 feet tall. He is an alien, so he, obviously he's not human. He has created the First Order. His apprentice is Kylo Ren, and the Knights of Ren are not run by Kylo Ren, but they were a group that Snoke created, and Kylo Ren just runs it. But they aren't made from him. He joined into them as their leader. Kylo Ren, of course, being Ben Solo, and so. I mean, that's most of what we have for the movies. But if we look into the other aspects of the Sith, the books, the Sith can continue with other groups picking up, and realistically, the Sith can appear from anyone who is of the dark side, who is a little bit selfish. They choose the dark side of usage of the Force, and they don't have that proper training. They might not have the finesse that an actual trained individual of the Sith would have, but there's a lot of aspects about the Sith that they can pick up. Just that desire for power, the use of your ability for your own personal gain. And I mean, there's a lot of notable Sith as well. In addition to the ones that I've mentioned: Darth Vader, Quinlan Vos, Savage Opress, Asajj Ventress, Darth Tyrannus, Darth Maul, Darth Sidious, Darth Plagueis, Darth Bane. There are hundreds of other Sith masters and apprentices and assassins and whatnot, and if you go into the books, you can find some other things that might interest you a little bit. Darth Sidious, in several books, actually had a group of Force-sensitive Jedi hunters. Kind of like the Inquisitors, but we've learned a lot more about what he can, about what he has also been capable of doing. If we go into the books, Emperor Palpatine had had 11 apprentices if you count Luke Skywalker, who he didn't really have as an apprentice, but he did communicate with him a bit, including Mara Jade, who in the books she was a dark trained Jedi. She was one of the Emperor's Hand, which is the title of a dark Jedi Force trained individual who's not going to be she wouldn't be a Sith or a Dark Jedi, but she would have some of their capabilities. In the storyline, She ended up marrying Luke Skywalker, becoming Mara Jade Skywalker, and having a family. She taught both Jaina Solo and Anakin Solo, who in the books, young Jedi Knights, were the children of Luke and Leia. Jaina Solo, of course, becoming a Jedi Master, and her brother, Darth Caedus, or Jaqen Solo, succumbing to the dark side, and Anakin Solo dying. A lot of people have boiled the Star Wars storyline down to a whole bunch of bad stuff happens, and the Skywalker family is always in the middle of it, which is kind of true. Episode 1, they pick up some slave boy, and it turns out that he's an ace pilot, and everything goes great with him, except when it doesn't. And then the rest of the story kind of revolves around the Skywalker family. Yeah, I think that kind of covers most of this episode. I know it's a little bit long, and it's kind of boring because I only have the one picture up, but there's so much information about the Sith and the Jedi. So I mean, I could leave you with the Code of the Sith, since I have been talking about the Sith pretty much exclusively this episode. The Sith Code is peace is a lie, there's only passion. It is the counterpoint to the Jedi Code, of course. The Jedi Code being... the Jedi Code, of course, being emotion yet peace, ignorance yet knowledge, passion yet serenity, chaos yet harmony, and death yet the Force. This was the original mantra of the Jedi Code, but by the time of the movies, it had changed a little bit. During the early period, it was there is no emotion, there is peace, there is no ignorance, there is knowledge, there is no passion, there is serenity, there is no chaos, there is harmony, there is no death, there is the Force. The phrase "there is no chaos, there is harmony" is sometimes removed at some of them, and then there's another version that appeared 32 years before the Battle of Yavin, so that would have been in just early on in episodes 1 and 2. Would have been: Jedi are the guardians of peace in the galaxy. Jedi use their powers to defend and protect, never to attack others. Jedi respect all life in any form. Jedi serve others rather than rule over them for the good of the galaxy. And Jedi seek to improve themselves through knowledge and training. However, the Sith Code is a code of an oppressed people. It doesn't sound evil. It sounds like the underdog, the code of the underdog rising up to take back what's theirs. Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion I gain strength. Through strength I gain power. Through power I gain victory. Through victory my chains are broken. The Force shall free me. And there is one more version of the Code of the Sith, but it's not in English. It sounds a little bit like Nuultash Zwolz Shasotskun Shasot's Jontu Chatsatl Nu Tuk Chukjontu Chatsatl Nu Midwan Midwanjotul Chatsatl Nu Asha Asha Jontu Kutswinotu Itsu Nyak Wanonks Kyoshk Nun. So, it's a little bit harder to understand, but it is, literally the way of the Sith doctrine. There are people who have broken it down into each part and figured out exactly where these contrasts exist and why, which, isn't incredibly important, but overall, yeah, I think that's kind of it. This episode's been 30 minutes long. That's way more than I was expecting it to be. So, may the 4th be with you. Expect something from the Revenge of the 5th. Probably more TIE Fighter stuff, and I will see you next time.